Hello, my name is Crive, and this is my Sylvie Sailor's Abyss guide / commentary. Our Sailor's Abyss is, at the moment of this recording, the highest timed Sailor's Abyss key in the world. We beat the second team by 5 minutes, they were out of time, and it is also the highest timed key in the world in general. In this video, I'm gonna go with you over the setup that I used, the talents that I used, routes, considerations there, and how to deal with the trash and the problems that the trash throws at you, and how to navigate the boss. This video has timestamps, so if you are only interested in a specific part, please use the timestamps to go there. Now I'm briefly going with you over my setup. I was playing the Cloak Legendary. My talents for this key were as follows. I was using a slightly different gem setup. I had one more purple perk unlocked here instead of red. And my weapon is using these traits. Alright, let's first talk about legendary considerations for this key. Normally I would recommend you to go with the neck legendary for this key, as it really solves one of our major problems in the first pulls with the Witch Rest Lashers, and that's keeping the tank and the group alive at the same time. That's one of the areas that Sylvie really struggles with, and by playing the neck legendary, it allows us to get the small shield that really buffers some of the damage from the Lashers onto the group and helps us deal with this problem in a better way. One other problem that we encounter though, as we go higher and higher with the key level, is that the group's damage output really doesn't go up as soon as you hit your perfect build, but you still have to deal with the mobs having more HP. And the way you deal with that is by doing bigger and bigger pulls, and that puts more and more pressure on the tank again. So the issue that I had to solve with my legendary choice was, what do I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on keeping the group a bit more stable with the neck legendary, or do I help my tank in these insanely big pulls that we're doing to timer 52 with the Cloak Legendary? And in the end, I felt like the tank survivability was a bigger issue, so I went with the Cloak Legendary and had to deal with the Lashers in a more efficient way at the start and just play that part a little bit better. I would recommend you to still play the neck legendary if you are not struggling with tank survivability in the later parts of the dungeon, but if you are, then I think the cloak is a great choice. Okay, let's talk about talents now. That's the setup that I would recommend you to run. It's not the setup I use, but I think this is the generally better setup for most cases. We are picking up Verdant Restoration because it helps us with tank healing and single target healing. We're also going with Natural Knowledge for better mana management, and picking up Trading Restoration. And this talent really is very good for this key, especially for the first part with the Witch Rest Lashers and the dots they put on the group. By picking this talent, you can keep perma-hots up on the group and don't need to refresh them as often. And it helps with the last boss in his second phase, where again, you don't need to refresh your hots all the time. Then we are going with Nurtured Haven, a really good pickup for this key again, because you can use your Safe Haven in the first pull, and it helps with healing the Lashers, and you also get it back for the second pull. So that's a really good pickup, especially in combination with Natural Protector. What Natural Protector does here is give us the small breathing room when you have lots of dots from the Lashers on the group. So you would start the first pull, for example, then wait for some dots to build up onto the group, and when you feel like you can't keep up anymore, you just put down your safe haven, you get this big shield, you get a little bit of breathing room, and then you can do the same thing in the second pull. We're also going with Bluey's Gambit, just for tank survivability. The 5%, even though they seem small, make a big difference. And we're playing Flower Power. It really helps with the cooldown acceleration that we get from our haste, and also by just having 2 charges, that's really good in the first few pulls, and also on the last boss. Then I would not go with too many defensive talents here. We don't really need them. There's a couple soaks at the end from the Magi, but elusive wilding is usually enough to deal with them. And also on the last boss, magic ward of course could help, but I feel like if you're playing this fight with trailing restoration and you have perma bots up on the group, that's almost a better defensive than just having magic ward. But of course you could play this way too. Now for the setup that I used to deal with this key, I had the issue that at this level the tank just takes so much damage, so I had to actually spec out of Natural Protector. That was the only talent that I really wanted to give up. I didn't want to give up on anything else really, and I went for Nettle to the Pedal for a little bit more tank healing, and then also for magic ward, because at this key level the dots on the plants and on the last boss are just hurting so much that I need to pick up a defensive talent. But on lower levels you can go without that talent. Okay, let's briefly talk about routes. We played this route, and as I told you before, the higher you go in the key level, you get the issue that your group's damage output really doesn't go up, but the enemies of course gain more health. So the way you have to deal with this is by doing fewer pulls, more spicy pulls, so you can still time the dungeon in time. We went with this route where we pull all of the slashers onto those two Vengeful Shades and the Water Elemental, and as soon as the first lashers died, we pulled in the last two lashers, and then we did the same thing in this pull where we played those 8 lashers, and then once they died we chained in 3 extra lashers. Then we skipped with Shroud to pull 3 and did one big pull here, and afterwards we picked up the Forgotten Souls here on the left. We chickened the Vengeful Shade because we played with the FX empowered minions and Meteor, and this Vengeful Shade is empowered and does quite a bit of tank damage. Those empowered mobs are quite dangerous, and the Shade would also basically one-shot if the debuff went through. We didn't want to deal with that, so we chickened it and played that pull, and then we went to the boss. If you are not playing a very high key, then you don't really need to play the whole dungeon in 4 pulls. There is a different route that I would recommend you to play, and that's this route. It takes a bit of the spiciness out from the first pull and the second pull, because you are playing fewer lashers in this pulls, and instead you are picking up this third pull that takes some of the lashers that you would normally play in pull 2, and also takes a bit of spiciness out here in pull 5, because you are not playing the Forgotten Souls here that put quite a bit of tank pressure there. Now, if you are playing the Shadow Lord affix, you might ask yourself what route is the best in this case, because as you can see, the Lord spawns after 50% and you are at 41% after pull 3, and then suddenly you're at 78% after pull 4. In this case, I recommend you to run this route where you play this pull 3, which gets you to 54%. You spawn the Shadow Lord here, and then you can play this difficult 4th pull with the Lord buff active, and then you do a quite decent pull 5, and then you have the Lord buff again for the last boss. Now let's finally start with the dungeon run. Here in this first pull we have to deal with 3 different kinds of enemies. First we have the Witch Rest Lasher, which just puts dots on the group. Then we have the Water Elemental, which requires a kick because it's healing one mob on the healing waters, and we need to stand in melee of it, because if you stand outside it casts Hydro Bolt, and that hits that player that stands outside and does quite a bit of damage, so you want to stand in melee. Then we also have the Vengeful Shade, which puts a heavy hitting dot that needs to be dispelled on one player. You want to stop one, or your group ones should stop one, and then the other one can be dispelled. We are using Rend Melee here on pull, just because it prevents the Witch Rest Lashers from putting dots on the group. And afterwards, I'm basically starting to use my Heart Bloom instantly, just to keep the group healthy here. I'm also getting my Safe Haven on cooldown to help a bit with the healing. Safe Haven and Heart Bloom is a great combination to press together, because it amplifies the healing so much. And then I'm also pressing my dice. That's the 15% damage reduction trinket, and I'm pressing it here because I want to have it back for the third pull. The third pull is quite hard on the tank, and I'm just pressing it here because I know I want to have it back for the third pull. So I have one use here in the first pull for free basically, because there's no other point afterwards where I can press it and still get it back for the third pull. And as soon as the first lashers die, we are getting in a couple more lashers, and then we're just cleaving everything down. And as soon as the lashers are dead, the pressure on the tank also goes down by quite a bit, and the pressure on the group goes down too. Now I'm just looking here to basically reset my life pedal. You see me just spam nettle bolt here. I want to get life pedal back, and I want to start the next pull again with 2 charges of heart bloom and ideally 2 charges of life pedal, because it's quite a difficult pull. You see lots of lashers, and you see I have my safe haven basically back. So here at the start of the pull, I'm just looking at my tank. I'm looking at his toughness. You see the blue bar below his health bar, that's his toughness, and I'm looking for that one to drop. When it drops, I basically want to give him bark skin just to give him that DR that he's missing, because this blue bar gives him damage reduction. When it's low, he has less damage reduction, and then I can come in there with bark skin. Then I'm dropping my safe haven here as well, as soon as I see that the situation starts to become a bit spicy, and then we instantly stabilize again with my safe haven, and I'm also using my weapon here instead of safe haven just because it heals so much more in this case. After the lashers are dead, we're looking to pull in the other 3 lashers, and you see my tank do this here, and then I am basically just cruising here, not much going on. I'm just using my life pedal here and just spamming nettle bolt, trying to get my cooldowns back for the next big pull that we're doing. I just want to get safe haven back, and I want to start the pull with as many resources as possible. One thing that I'm sometimes looking out for here is just using stuff, getting stuff on cooldown, especially what I mean by that is my heart bloom and my life pedal, and that is to build a big mushroom army. So one thing I could have done here was to use 1 life pedal here just to get more mushrooms for the next pull so I can send them on pull, but I'm not doing that here. There's no good reason for that. I just didn't think about it. Now we are shrouding here to skip the next 2 packs, and I can already talk about the 3 new mobs that we are encountering here. First of all, we have the Forgotten Soul, which just does tank damage, but it's very squishy. Then we have the Fading Raiders, which do tank damage, but are a bit more tanky. And then with the Deep-Bound Magi, which is a caster that has a soak and casts that need to be interrupted. Here on pull, I'm using my ulti instantly to get it on cooldown, because I want to get it back for the next pull. And then I'm looking at my tank's health bar. I'm watching if is it moving slowly, is it moving quickly, and then I'm making decisions based on that, using my save haven here quite early, because that's where all the mobs are alive, and my tank needs a bit more healing throughput here. Then as soon as the Forgotten Souls die, the tank pressure goes down a bit. We have the soak. I'm root zapping that soak, you can look out for that. And then I am just using the rest of my cooldowns. I'm not worrying too much about mana here, just spam healing my tank if I need to, because I know after this pull I will have a little bit of a breather where my tank is pulling some more mobs and I can regenerate my mana. I'm also not using my mana pot here because I want to have it for the next pull, and I know, as I just told you, that I'm getting a little bit of a breather where I'm getting my mana. Now for this next pull, there will be no new enemies. We again have some shades that we saw earlier. We have some lashers, we have the Forgotten Souls that my tank just pulled, and we have another Magi. You can also see there is an empowered shade. We're chickening that one because we don't want to deal with that. And then here I'm focusing on my tank. He will get an early bark skin here because this damage that the pull here does to my tank is front loaded. It's all these Forgotten Souls that are quite squishy but do a lot of tank damage. So I want to front load all my healing here. I'm using my safe haven, using my bark skin, just putting lots of healing cooldowns out here, using my heart bloom, my life pedal just to keep the tank alive. And you see my ultimate is almost back just because I used it so early, and we have the meteor affix. So as soon as I get my ultimate back here, I'm just pressing it to stabilize the group. You can see the soak going out here, and I would have ideally root zapped that one because I didn't. My RDS is dropping quite low to around 10%, but I get my ultimate back at that point, and instantly get him back to a healthy state. One thing you want to look out for as Sylvie is that you want to match your healing output as closely as possible to your group's damage intake. Some of your spells basically do no healing, but provide more healing later. For example, your Safe Haven or your Heart Bloom. When you put those out, you are falling behind by like 1 or 2 seconds because it takes a global to put them out, but then you have stronger healing afterwards. But if you are already behind in healing, let's say your tank is at 10%, and then you put out a Safe Haven, then your tank will die in that 1 second. So you kind of need to play a dungeon multiple times to figure out where those points are, where more damage is coming, and then you want to put out your Safe Haven before the more damage intake is happening. Now, here we have a boss with quite a few abilities. First of all, we have the Deafening Screech. It's an ability you want to line behind this mast here in the middle. If you don't line it, you take heavy damage, and if you're spell casting while the ability is going off, you are getting locked out of your spells for quite a bit. Then we have Binding Strike, which hits 2 people and they need to stand close together. If you are standing a little bit apart, then you are starting to take heavy damage. The third ability is this Undertow. First, one player gets it and you want to dispel that player outside, so you drop the puddle outside. And the second Undertow, you want to line at least here at the start, because this second debuff is overlapping with the Screech. And you saw me here, I was lining and then I was dispelling myself afterwards. One thing that can happen here, especially with unexperienced groups and players, is that they want to stand outside. They're waiting for the second dispel, but you actually have to line here if you are waiting for the second dispel, because you're standing outside, because you are you don't want to drop your puddle in melee. Then you will tank the Screech and you will very likely die. So the second person that gets the Undertow always should line here behind the mast for the Screech. And similar overlaps will happen later on in the fight as well. The last ability that the boss has is this wave here, and that wave also needs to be lined behind the mast by the player that gets it. And there can be dangerous overlaps where, for example, the player that has the wave is also bound by Binding Strike to a different player. So in this case, both players need to line behind the mast so they don't separate and take heavy damage. And now you just see these overlaps happening in different varieties. We have Undertow overlapping with wave, we have Undertow overlapping with the Screech, we have Binding Strike overlapping with the wave or the Screech, and so on. Now at the 50% mark, you want to click the mast and the boss will start his intermission where we get drawn to him. You want to use a Heart Bloom here, just like I'm using it, because there starts to be ticking damage on the group and you don't want the group to die in intermission where you can't heal them, so your Heart Bloom will carry them with its healing in this phase. Then one dangerous part here are the Undertows, because they do quite a bit of damage to those players. So I'm always trying to have a healing cooldown ready for those when they go out. So for the first one here, you saw me roots a bit, and then for the next one, you should plan in a different healing cooldown. You won't have your root set for every single one of the Undertows. So the next one could be, for example, your Dice or your Ultimate or your Safe Haven. Then one thing I want you to look out for the second phase on this boss is that you always keep up your Restore Life hot on the group. So every time it drops, you see me refresh it on those players, and that also helps me with building Heart Blooms. You also want to look a bit at spacing out your Heart Blooms, because you won't be able to constantly have a Heart Bloom up for the second phase. There really isn't any ability that does burst damage, so I would space out my Heart Blooms in a way that you wait for the group to drop a bit, roughly to 50%, and then you can activate Heart Bloom, stabilize the group again for the 15 seconds that Heart Bloom is lasting, and then you can wait for your group to drop a little bit again. Maybe you use your weapon to stabilize it again to full, and then you wait for it to drop again to 50, and then you use your next Heart Bloom, and so on. This is why the second phase becomes quite manageable. Also keep in mind, you have quite a bit of time to dispel the debuff, so don't feel pressured to insta-dispel this debuff. Here, for example, we get an Undertow, and I'm insta-dispelling that one on the first player, of course, but then we have lots of other abilities happening where I can't dispel that player, and you see me just hold it On my Mara here, I'm just healing the group. We first get the wave, then we get the screech, and now only then I'm dispelling my Mara at that point. You have a lot of time to dispel it, keep that in mind, don't feel pressure to dispel quickly. And that is how we timed the world's first 52 in-time key and the world's first 52 Saylor civils. I hope my guide and commentary helped you. If you want to see more of content like this, I'm streaming almost every single evening on Twitch. You can find my Twitch linked down below. My UI is also available for download. You can find the import link also down below in the description. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. This is part of a video series, so if you are interested in seeing more guides and commentaries like this, feel free to subscribe. See you in the next one.